So where do we begin today? I want to talk a little bit about my own personal life. When I was 16 years old and my father was 48, he died of a heart attack. We were playing tennis at the time when, without warning, he suffered a massive coronary and died in my arms. I remember many things about that day, but one memory that stands clear was after my mom showed up at the hospital and the doctor came out to pronounce him dead. She turned to me and said, "You're the man of the house now." I remember it as if it were yesterday and distinctly thinking, holy crap, I'm only 16 years old, for God's sakes. I am not ready for this. She was so traumatized, it was clear she couldn't handle telling my three younger siblings. And so without a driver's license and barely knowing how to drive, I took the family station wagon 15 miles back to our home, and on the front lawn with screaming and crying children and neighbors, broke the news to my 14 and 10-year-old sisters and 6-year-old brother. It was awful. At 64, that moment and the trauma it represented still stands as one of the most critical defining moments in my life. One that, for worse and yes, sometimes even better, has shaped who I am today. But here's the thing. I am not alone in my grief or struggle. Some had it better than me in their childhoods and some much, much worse. Same as it is today. It is what makes us human. What also makes us human is our capacity to rise above and to choose our response. This choice, whether conscious or not, has a word. It is resilience. It may feel like what we're going through has never happened before, and yet historically, we are not the first to experience global pandemics. The Antonine Plague, the Spanish flu of 1918, the bubonic plague, the cholera pandemic, AIDS, SARS, there are many. And now COVID-19. In each of these cases, we came back with resilience. The word resilience comes from Latin, resiliens, the root of which means to rebound, to jump, or to leap. Maybe the most interesting way of thinking about resilience is that its root can be found in the Latin phrase for starting point. This implies that our true character is measured not in anything we initially do, but in how we respond when we are tested. In all studies on resilience, researchers have found that resilient people share three things in common that non-resilient people do not. One, resilient people see the world as a meaningful place. Two, resilient people see themselves as having agency in that world. And three, resilient people see that successes and failures have been placed in their path to teach them something. Let's look a little bit more closely at these foundational ideas. First, the world is a meaningful place. Einstein said it well. There are only two ways to look at the universe, either as nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. I can't answer the larger theological question for you, but I can say if you want to build your resiliency muscle, then keeping your eye and mind open to the possibility of meaning in this time is step number one. When researchers and clinicians look at who copes well in crisis and even grows through it, it's not those who focus on pursuing happiness to feel better. It's those who cultivate instead an attitude of what is called tragic optimism. Tragic optimism is a phrase originated by Viktor Frankl, who wrote the landmark book Man's Search for Meaning about his experience in the Auschwitz concentration camp. It means the ability to maintain hope and find meaning in life despite its inescapable pain, loss, and suffering. He studied survivors and those that perished and found that the survivors shared one thing in common. They never obsessively focused on comfort or food or happiness or even survival. They endlessly looked for the meaning in whatever their day brought them, no matter what horror or unimaginable sadness. They kept asking these three questions. Where is the meaning in this? What am I to gain from this? How can I be my very best during the very worst? In our own country, after 9/11, studies of subjects who were more resilient found that they sought meaning in what had happened. This did not mean that they were Pollyannas. While perception is reality, reality is also reality. They fully understood the tragedy that we were all experiencing. They had the same levels of sadness and stress as less resilient people. We see it in the research over and over. Resilient people feel intensely negative reactions to trauma. They experience the darkest of emotions, including stress, despair, and fear. And yet, they stay present with the pain. They hold the experience. But, and this is critical, it is not where they stop, because then they actively seek hope and light, and this buoys them. When I was 42, I too almost died of a heart-related issue. I was in Lima, Peru, and about to fly to Cusco, a city at 15,000 feet above sea level, and hike into Machu Picchu. While in the National Museum, for some unknown reason at sea level, I suffered major angina. I collapsed and was flown back to the United States, where I underwent quintuple bypass surgery. I had 7 major blockages, 2 of them over 90%. I was literally a day away from dead and didn't know it. Research tells us that heart attack survivors who find meaning in the weeks and months following their crisis were 8 years later healthier and more likely to be alive than those who didn't. For me, personally, it's 22 years out and I haven't had any symptoms return. I look back on that time, which was the impetus to go and get a degree in divinity, write a one-man play about my experience, and most important, dramatically change my lifestyle as one of grace and deep meaning. Like my father's death, it profoundly shaped me for the better and who I am today. How did this happen? My secret during recovery, and opposite to many heart patients who can suffer deep depression after heart surgery, was not to ask, why did this happen to me? My secret was continually to ask, why did this happen for me? Holding an attitude of tragic optimism can bounce us forward, and we can grow not despite the pain, but because and through it. It's not the trauma that creates the growth, it's the response.